Hello, James.
Hello, Tristan. How are you today?
Today, you will learn, everyone, you'll learn everything you need to know about the biggest sporting event.
It is the World Cup. The greatest competition ever. Easily.
And it started hundreds of years ago when Aztecs kicked human heads to one another and pigs' bladders.
Do you know what? It would not surprise me.
The biggest event in the world started almost 100 years ago. Let's go back to where it began. Do you know what year it started in, James?
1930.
Yes.
I do know, yeah.
In Uruguay. And Uruguay, the reason why I know Uruguay exists when I was younger was because they won the first World Cup, right? Because you've never even heard of that country before knowing that information. It put them on the map. So only 4 teams from Europe made it. Because for Europeans back then, 100 years ago, it's no airplanes for commercial flights. So they're taking the boat from Europe to South America. And they trained on the deck of the ships, running up and down on the ship's deck.
You'd want to make sure that you had a spare ball, because imagine if it went overboard.
Bring a sack of 100 balls.
Hundreds of balls. It's your paradise.
Yeah. Your dream rolling around on exactly this massive, endless sack. There was no big stadiums back then. There was no cameras. So moving on to 1950, 20 years later, the World Cup is in Brazil. In that final, in 1950, Brazil played against Uruguay, and 200,000 people went to the stadium in Rio.
That's true. Yeah, but 1950 was a relatively big one. The big one was probably 58 in terms of popularity in creating the modern World Cup we have today. 58 was in Sweden, and it was the first World Cup of Pelé,
who many consider still the best player ever.
Yeah, he was 17 when he won the World Cup in 58. He played in 4 World Cups, and he won 3 out of those 4. The one he didn't win was 1966, where England won.
So yeah, 1966 is when England won their 1 World Cup that they still talk about today.
Their solitary World Cup. My old man, my old father, he saw it on the telly in black and white, and he was 10 years old. He was but a boy.
So in 1966, when England won the World Cup, did you know that the World Cup was stolen? The trophy was stolen from England.
Yeah, do you know the name of the dog which found the trophy?
Pickles.
Pickles.
I knew it.
Fuck. I knew it was going to be Pickles. I almost said it. I was like, Pickles. No. God, that was it. Okay.
Yeah. So
Pickles,
trophy was stolen, and then a man called David Corbett, he takes his dog for a walk, and the dog starts sniffing in a bush and finds a package wrapped in old newspaper. The package was wrapped in old newspaper. So David, the dog's owner, opens the package, and inside it, the World Cup, the trophy, in a bush, wrapped in newspaper. He was a national hero, and he got a medal. You know, it always looks kind of a bit ridiculous when you see dogs wearing medals. You see it quite often, right? You know, police dogs, and dogs don't care. You know, dogs are above that. People are just putting their man-made piece of rope with a random piece of metal on it around a dog. It's they don't have an ego to please, you know.
They don't need it. Yeah. My vibration is completely different to you monkeys, man. I don't need this.
Do you understand English? But when you speak, you freeze. On my app, Speak Every Day. First, you read a short story, then speak about it with AI. Read a little, speak a little. Speak at coffeechatenglish.com. That's coffeechatenglish.com. I don't think England are spiritually ready to win it again. They're just going to go too crazy.
Spiritually ready.
Not spiritually grounded enough. I mean, you saw what happened when Italy and England met at the Euro final, right? It was 2 years ago. Or was it the one 6 years ago? And
6 years ago.
They stormed the stadium and people got hurt and the whole of London was just smashed into pieces. I was there in London at that time. And it was just insane. Final? Yeah, I was in London at the final, and that's why I say England are not spiritually ready for it. So my South African friend was there, and we were walking around London. It was his first time in, like I guess you could say, a developed country. And he was just like, we both had a bit of reverse culture shock, you know, like not quite sure how to cross the streets exactly and like order a drink in a pub or anything. And because we had been in Vietnam for like a long time, and so we both met up in London, and there was just smashed glass like all over the floor. And by 12 noon, we went down into the tube station, which is the subway station in London. And this is right after COVID. So all of these lads from outside of London were descending on the capital city. And they were just chanting, like quite racist chants, actually. And just like, England, England. And this one guy had a bottle of cider in one hand, blood streaming down his face. And this was at noon of that day. And so many people were just topless. So these people had been just at home during COVID, right? Probably bored out of their minds. And this was their first real taste of freedom at the same time. So London just was crazy. And we're walking around, my South African friend, who's from South Africa, and he's from a dangerous part of South Africa as well. And even he was just like, what happened? Is someone going to attack me? Like, he genuinely thought someone was going to just attack him randomly. And I was like, well, why would they do that? What, just randomly attack you? It's like, yeah, I don't know. And I was like, well, why? And he was like, well, they might ask me a question about football and, like, I won't know the answer. And he thought that was like grounds to be attacked.
Your friend sounds like the softest South African I've ever heard in all my life. So I've only met a few South Africans, I'll be honest, like less than 10. They're pretty hardcore.
But this says how much the atmosphere of violence and volatility was in London. Because this is a guy who's had a gun pointed at him like twice before.
Yeah, usually. They're like
and
hardcore,
that's how dark the vibe was in London. And so I got on a bus back to Bournemouth, and as I got to the station and just saw taking the tube, just walking through like central areas of London, like, England, yeah, blah, just like puking in the streets, just like people vomiting on the floor, smashed glasses everywhere. And as I said, this is at 2 p.m. And when I got in that bus, I was like, I have never wanted Italy to win as much as I do now. Or rather, I've never wanted England to lose like as much as I do now. In the bus going back to Bournemouth, I was just like, these people do not deserve to win.
I've said
and I'm saying that, and I am English. You know, this podcast is going out to the world. But that's how much I was like just shocked by the behavior.
I said before, unfortunately, I mean, like Anglo-Saxons can sometimes be like pretty horrible. Yeah. They can be pretty horrible. We pretend that, you know, oh yes, don't worry, we'll have tea and scones. That's a very small percentage of the population. To be honest, that's the French aristocracy type of the population. The vast majority have that, you know, like German blood, have the tribal roots deep, deep, deep.
Maybe 2,000 years ago. These are the people that were just completely naked, covered in blue paint, while the
Yeah.
Romans came over, just, with civilization, and the blue painted, savages would just run at them from the trees. That
Well, if
is
I
English
if
people.
those are definitely Britons, yeah, 100%. If I remember, like the Romans were like, don't come to England. There's no point. They're not even good to be used as slaves. Not good
Apparently,
enough
one
to be a
of
slave, apparently.
what one of Julius Caesar's commanders was made to. He went to Britain to make a military unit, a fighting unit, soldiers. And apparently he wrote back to Caesar saying, all the Britons do is drink and fight. He can't make an army out of these people.
How education can change a nation, yeah?
And then, of course, you had education, the Industrial Revolution, British Empire, all of this. But I guess what I'm saying is underneath all of that, it's as if there's some
Yeah.
kind of base level wild savagery that's an inherent part of the British psyche,
That is
mind.
true. Yeah.
So Pele won 3 World Cups. England won it in 1966. Your father remembers it. My grandfather remembers it. And then we have a very famous World Cup, which is 1986 with Diego Maradona. And Argentina won that World Cup. But they did so in quite a strange way. I'm sure you know about this story.
So Diego Maradona, arguably the greatest footballer who ever lived, an incredible person in so many different ways. And he scored with his hand, famously. And then he scored maybe the greatest goal you will ever see on film.
So what happened it was the first goal, was it? In that quarter final, the
The
handball.
first go yeah, the first goal was for handball. Yes.
And so the ball was crossed in to near the goal, just on the outside of the box. And
Yeah.
Diego Maradona and the goalie, they all jumped up at the same time. And
Yeah.
Maradona lifted his hand and he fisted, so he punched the ball into the net. But it kind of looked like it was a header. It looked a bit like it could have come off his head. But now, later on, they realized it was definitely his hand. But back then, the referee gave it as a goal. And then he scored that ridiculous goal where he ran it through like the whole English team, basically, right? He ran it
Yeah,
past
absolutely. Yeah,
like
yeah.
7 different players.
Round about the halfway line, he just took on the whole team and scored.
And what that shows
Almost like an
us,
adult versus children. Also, at that time, it was very, very politically heated because of the Falklands War.
and to just summarize that in 2 sentences, you have the Falklands Islands, which are just off of Argentina. Argentina invaded them with a ground force of, I think, 800, like 1,000 men. But then the UK sent the Navy and to protect the islands. And then there was a war between Argentina and the UK in the mid 1980s. So yeah, it was politically charged. And yeah, English people just, they couldn't handle it, right? They just could not handle the hand of God, especially at that time. And
Yeah,
they still can't handle it now,
no,
right?
you're
People
right.
still can't accept
Yeah,
it now.
you're completely correct. People today like hate Maradona because of that moment, and it's only since I've lived outside of England that I've truly appreciated the genius of Maradona because he was unbelievable. Also, as a person, like a brilliant person when he had the right attitude. Let's say when he
But
had the wrong attitude, he was not a great person.
So my personal earliest memories of the World Cup, and this is when I first became an Italy fan over being an England fan. So it was in the USA in 1994, and I was with my Italian uncles in Montreal, in Canada, where they live. And so for the whole World Cup, we would have barbecues outside and make a big deal out of every game. And Italy reached the final against Brazil. And they have who's my favourite player to this day, a man called Roberto Baggio. They called him the Divine Ponytail because he just had this one big dreadlock hanging out the back of his hair or braid. Do you remember Roberto Baggio?
Unbelievable player, absolutely phenomenal. And that World Cup, he dragged Italy by himself, a bit like Maradona in '86. He dragged Italy to that final. People still speak about Baggio today.
So it was him who dragged the Italian team to the final. And
Yes.
then I remember just sitting there in front of the big box TV, and it was extra time against Brazil. And Brazil were piling on the pressure. They were the team more likely to score through extra time. And then it went into penalties. And then it was like the fourth or fifth penalty. And it was Baggio's turn. And then he took his penalty and he kicked it. This is like before the internet, before people had other interests. The whole world was watching him. And he kicked it so high over the crossbar. It was unbelievable how high he kicked it over the crossbar. I don't know if you've seen video footage of that penalty. And I was 9 years old. So I was old enough to remember. And I was just confused. Yeah. I was like, this, what? Like, I couldn't understand. I couldn't process that Italy had lost it. And obviously he just looked at the floor. And but you know, it still affects Baggio to this day. And it completely changed his life.
Do you know about Baggio's life now?
Well, I know that he went into like meditation, isolation, became like a hardcore Buddhist.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he completely rejected all the fame and the attention he could potentially receive, because again, Italians are not angry at Baggio because they understand that he was so exhausted in that moment, and without him, they would not even have been in that position to be in the final, for him to have missed the penalty. So none of the Italians say anything bad about Baggio. They're not like, oh my God, Baggio missed. No. On the contrary, they always have a huge amount of respect for him.
Unlike Gareth Southgate, who missed the famous penalty for England, and everyone's like, "Oh, Gareth Southgate missed the penalty," and everyone like still like,
exactly. That's a really good point.
Rips on him for today. So Baggio, he seemed to have found some kind of peace after the World Cup. Would he have become like a Buddhist scholar, meditator, had he not missed that penalty? You know, maybe he's found peace now that he wouldn't have otherwise found. Perhaps the divine or a God guided him through missing that penalty, and it's a necessary step in his life.
Well, unfortunately, you know, it's a form of suffering which nobody can really say they've experienced anything similar to that. His suffering in that moment would have been incredibly unique.
It's basically the worst kind of suffering that you can happen to a human being in the 1990s. I
wouldn't go that far.
But without being hurt, without family members being hurt. Do you know what I mean?
I would say
one where people are not harmed. That is the worst thing that can happen to anyone.
I think
missing a penalty at a World Cup final.
Yeah, I think as a footballer and you're the star player and you miss a penalty in the World Cup final is a type of suffering which is extreme. It is an extreme form of suffering. So yeah, maybe sincerely, maybe if Baggio had scored that penalty, he would not have developed into the person he became. Maybe he would have been a lesser person.
So fast forward to 2014, the
Okay.
World Cup was in Brazil. Brazil, the historically the greatest football team ever. And they played Germany in the semi-final. The stadium was packed, parties on the street, everyone going crazy with samba, music and fireworks. And then do you know what happened to Brazil?
They lost 7-1 to Germany in the semi-final.
They
Yeah.
were absolutely trashed, weren't
Yeah.
they?
It
People
absolutely
were
trust.
crying in the crowd, like literally crying.
I mean, I mean, it was crazy. I mean, the first half in particular, if I remember, was just so bad for Brazil. They we mentioned before about how top quality players react differently to pressure. They completely lost any form of composure during that game, the Brazilians, and it was almost tragic, to be honest. It was so bad for the Brazilians. And then Germany surprisingly went on to win because they beat Argentina in the final.
And then, so that takes us to the present day. And then there's
More or less.
2022 in Qatar. And do you think people have talked more about corruption in FIFA, like now more than ever? Or do you think it's always been there to a large degree?
Corruption has definitely always been involved in football, 100%. There's definitely been match fixing and corruption and this and that and whatever. That being said, I think Qatar was a step too far. And
Yeah.
also, it was very, very well documented the number of migrants and workers and what have you who helped build these stadiums, who, again, lived in these incredibly poor conditions.
Well, the modern day slavery, and it was obvious it was happening, and
Yeah.
FIFA always just brushing it under the table. You know, what are you talking
But,
about?
but the thing is also with Qatar, the other, maybe many people don't know this, but the other team, the other nation, excuse me, which was in competition to host that World Cup was Australia. An Australian World Cup would have been pretty cool. A Qatar World Cup, it was obviously just for money, clearly just for money. And personally, um, sounds strange, but I personally boycotted that World Cup. I deliberately didn't watch any England games during that World Cup because I felt so strongly about it that even if I can do nothing at all, the one thing I can do is not watch. So I chose not to watch any England games in that tournament.
Well done.
The only thing I can actively do is not participate. So I did not participate.
Fair enough. And you were not the only one. Okay, so that brings us to 2026 with the current World Cup. 3 countries are hosting it: the USA, Canada, and Mexico. Something special happened a few days ago. Messi, he became the player with the most World Cup goals in all of history. And he can play for a while yet. He's still very fluid. You know, his body seems to move quite easily still, like as opposed to Ronaldo, who just seems super stiff on the pitch.
But also the way he plays the game, he doesn't run around too much. He doesn't press the opposition, and his intelligence is just on a complete another level when it comes to awareness and understanding where the ball is, understanding where other players are. He is still a phenomenal player, and if he half the player he is today in 4 years, maybe, like maybe you choose him. He maybe doesn't start every game, but you maybe have him in the squad.
But you know what I mean? Like Ronaldo, when Ronaldo runs, you kind of feel like his knees are going to snap in two.
I mean, the thing with Ronaldo, and I have a lot of respect for Ronaldo, it's all about like mentality and physical conditioning with the nutrition, with the exercises, with the stretching. Whereas the kind of ability Messi has is less likely to fade, to be honest.
Yeah, like when Ronaldo runs, there's not that much that separates Ronaldo running from when the Tin Man runs in The Wizard of Oz. He's like creaking and you have to oil him every so often. Father Time waits for nobody.
No, that's exactly it. I mean, and like, I know what you mean by saying he looks like an old man because he does look like an old man. Yeah, well, as you said, like with Messi, he looks more or less the same as he did 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Where Ronaldo, he does. It's like kind of, I don't know whether it's like just natural aging or maybe the treatments, or he's starting to look a bit weird. I can imagine, do you know, I can imagine Ronaldo in like 40 years just having like loads of bad plastic surgery and just
Yeah.
looking like a mess of a person. Like, have you seen Simon Cowell recently?
It looks scary, I would say. Like he
Yeah, like
looks, how his eyes like sit like in his face. Do you know what I mean? There's just something
definitely.
quite off and unnatural and kind of like, I mean, I don't want to say it, but not evil, but just not right, you know?
Definitely not right. I mean, it's got a weird.
And the
I
weird
mean,
thing is like, they have it in their head that they will look better. And that shows us how your perspective does become kind of skewed. The fact that they add to their surgery, right? It's not just one
yeah,
surgery to get to Simon
no,
Cowell's level. It's like it's one surgery in a few years, the next one, and the next one, and you're trying to, I guess, bring yourself back every time to this place you were before, but you end up just looking weirder and weirder. Like anorexia, right? People look in the
yeah.
mirror and they see something that's completely different to what other people see. I think their perspective just becomes not grounded in reality anymore,
I
unfortunately.
totally agree. It's body dysmorphia, isn't it? Body dysmorphia, where you believe you're overweight or underweight or what have you, and you desperately try to change your appearance to look in your mind better, but it's just
Mm.
never the truth.
The North American World Cup, people have not been happy about that, certain aspects of it. These hydration breaks, for a start, what's that about? It's the Americans, is what it is. It's so they can advertise, obviously. They need to make it more like American sports. So they can have, the big Coca-Cola banner and Budweiser and whatever else. And it's a fitting excuse, isn't it? Hydration breaks. And of course, 2 years ago, there's a Danish player. You remember the one? The Danish player collapsed on the pitch.
Christian
His
Eriksen.
heart, his heart stopped. And in that moment, the chairman of FIFA, Infantino, he's probably, doing this with his hands, rubbing his hands together, Mr. Burns style. He's like, ooh, I know what we can do with this.
I don't like hydration breaks because they're ad breaks, and to be honest, it kind of separates the game into four distinct quarters. Managers have even said now they're tactically changing how they play the game. Adverts at every single possible interval.
And the hydration break, it makes sense if it's a sweltering, like ferociously hot day. But last week, when there's a game in Vancouver, in Canada, and it was like 17 degrees Celsius, nobody needs a hydration break then.
And it was raining, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, yeah.